Hello everyone. Now let's see levy assessment and remission. Very important chapter. Very important from marks point of view also. Lot of technical things are there in this chapter and questions can come from every corner. And the weightage would be around 3 to 6 marks out of 25. But it is important. Okay. And before we start with this chapter, let me first explain you in brief the whole import procedure and introduce you to some documents, because these document names we will use in the course of the chapter many times. So you must understand what are the documentation involved and what is the full process of importation. So let's see. First of all, we have seen the conveyances by which goods are imported into India. Now let me introduce a lot of things. Suppose this is India. Okay. So on one side is the sea. So goods can be imported through sea route. So when the goods are imported through sea route, the conveyance that will be used will be the ships, right? Here we'll call them as vessels. In law, it is called as vessel, but to understand it is a ship. Then there can be land boundaries also, like with Pakistan and Bangladesh and Nepal, Bhutan, China. So if the goods are coming through land by railways or by trucks, by road, rail or road, then it will be brought by, of course, the rail or road means the trucks and all. So conveyance will mean the railway or the truck, as the case may be. And it can be imported by air also. Directly the aircraft can come into India and it can also bring the goods. So in that case the conveyance will be the aircraft. So conveyance can be ship, conveyance can be aircrafts, conveyance can be rail or road, means trucks and lorries and all. And it can also be animal. Yes, goods can also be imported through animal, like donkeys and all will be used to bring the goods into India in mountainous regions, you can say, like Nepal border and all. So animals can also be used. Okay, so these can be the different modes of importation: air, sea or land. Okay, so when the goods come in, you have customs stations located on the seaport, the airports and the land customs stations. So there are three kinds of customs stations, which will be primary customs stations, we had seen in the past chapter. When the goods are coming in from ship, it will be port. If it is coming by air, then there will be airports, and there will be land customs stations, LCDs, land customs stations. Okay, LCS, sorry, land customs station. Okay, and then, as we had discussed in that chapter, that since the ports are only on the coastal areas and ship is the major source of importation of goods, major source of transportation of international goods, because they bring bulk quantity of goods, air will be very costly, and land, we don't have much borders, only with these few countries who are poorer to us, so we don't import from them, rather we export more of the goods to them. Okay, that was an egoistic point, but still that's true. So normally the goods which are imported into India come through ship, the shipping routes. So Government of India has constructed ICDs, inland container depots, inside the territory of India. Like in Nagpur we have an ICD. There was a whole list of ICDs. So at various places we have got ICDs, even in Delhi and different places. So the goods which come in through the port, the ship will bring the goods to the port, and then from the port they will be taken to ICDs without payment of duty, and then the complete procedure will be done at the ICDs. So we can write ICDs also in between. And then there are airport freight stations and sea freight stations and all, where the goods are stored. And then of course there is a warehouse. Warehouse, we can keep the goods in the warehouse for some time and then clear later on, right? So let's see now in deep how this process happens, how the import happens. So now let's move on to any one of the custom station like a port. So let's go down to Mumbai port. This is the whole port area, this is the sea, and this is the landmass, this is the port. Inside the port there will be an area called as customs area. This will be called as customs area. So when the ship comes here from outside India, it will unload the goods into this customs area, and the importer will then come and clear the goods from the customs area. So let's see the whole process, and let's see the documents which are involved. Now keep track of the documents that I'll be naming and record them straight in your head. Okay. So when the ship comes, and this is the ship, this is not a drawing class, so it may not look like a ship, but it is a ship. The ship in charge. The ship in charge. So we have seen the definition of person in charge, right? You remember? In case of railway, it was the conductor or the guard, and for all other cases, the main driver is called as the person in charge. So the ship in charge will file a document, the first document, with the customs authorities, and that is called as import manifest, also called as import general manifest. In short, import manifest, or if you take the full name, import general manifest. So the ship in charge files the very first document, IGM, import general manifest, okay, with the customs authorities. Normally this is filed before arrival. So these days everything is electronic. So when the ship is coming, the ship office in London or New York, wherever it may be, they will just file it electronically with the government of India on the customs site. Okay. So it is already filed, you can say, before the ship comes. Similarly for aircraft, they have to file before coming into India. They have to file the import manifest. Now this import manifest is a detailed document of all the goods which are covered on board the ship. So whatever goods are here, they will be disclosed in this import manifest, including the goods to be unloaded at this port and the goods which are carried on board but not for this port. They are to be carried to some other port in India or maybe some place outside India. So the ship is coming from New York and later on it is going to Japan. So it has some goods to be unloaded at the Mumbai port, and the balance will be taken to Cochin port. Some goods are to be unloaded there, and 90% of the goods will go along with the ship to other countries. Now again, remember these words. The goods which are to be unloaded will be mentioned separately, and the goods which are to be taken to some other port in India will be mentioned separately as transit goods. So the goods which are on board the ship but not to be unloaded but taken somewhere else is called as transit goods. So it will be mentioned separately. Transit will again carry two things, means mentioned in two different paragraphs: transit to another place in India and transit to outside India. So that has to be mentioned very clearly. How much goods are to be unloaded, how much transit, and how much transit outside India. Right? Then the officers they have the right to come on board the ship, check the goods, etc., documents, everything, and then they will allow the goods to be unloaded. So that permission of unloading is called as entry inwards. So the second document will be entry inwards. So first we file the IGM, the ship in charge will file the IGM to the customs department. Then after verification and checks and all, they will grant entry inwards. When this entry inward is granted to the ship, then the unloading can start. The unloading will start and the goods will be unloaded onto the port. After unloading, the goods will go in the custody of the custodian. So there is a custodian of this customs area. This custodian, in case of major ports and all, is the airport, the Port Authority of India. The government department is the Port Authority of India. They will handle the goods. In case of aircrafts, means the airports, it is managed by the Airport Authority of India. And similarly, if in case of small ports and airports where the government department is not working, then they can appoint, the commissioner has a power to appoint some custodian there. Some agency will be appointed as a custodian. So the goods that are unloaded will come in the custody of the custodian. Okay, the custodian will have the custody of these goods. It comes in the custody of custodian. Okay, not the customs department. Custodian is a different department. So they will take care of the goods. Okay, now the goods have come. So the work of the ship in charge is done for the time being. Then we'll see how it has to leave India. When it wants to leave, what it has to do. But right now, as far as imported goods are concerned, they have been unloaded. So that part of the job is done. Now comes the importer. Importer, who owns the goods, who has the document of title to the goods. He will come to the port and file documents for clearance of goods. There are two methods of clearance. One, home consumption, and second, warehousing. So you have two options. You can remove the goods directly for home consumption on payment of duty, or you can first store the goods in a warehouse and then later on you can clear them from the warehouse. So there are two ways in which you can clear: home consumption and warehousing. If he has come for home consumption, then he has to file bill of entry for home consumption. He'll have to file a bill of entry for home consumption. Before filing the bill of entry, he has to do self-assessment of tax under section 17, so that we are going to see in this chapter. Okay, section 17 and section 18. 17 is assessment. You have to do your own assessment. So you know what goods are being imported. So you have your bill of lading. Bill of lading is a document of title which the ship has given you. So you write those goods, you value them, you know the price and all. So you apply section 14, value them. Then you find out the rate of tax, do the classification, find out the rate of tax, apply that rate, calculate the duty. So in the bill of entry, apart from other declarations, the what are the goods, the description and everything, you have to also mention the value, the rate of duty and total tax payable. Okay, you mention it, you pay it, and then file it with the customs department, the officer in charge of customs. So you have to file your bill of entry. The officer in charge will check the bill of entry and everything is fine. Then he will return it to you. As soon as it is returned, you have to make the payment. And if you have not already made the advance payment, and then the payment part we'll see in section 47 in detail. So forget it right now. So you have to pay the duty. After you pay the duty, the clearance order will be given. Clearance order will be given, and then you can take the custody of your goods and take home. Simple. So here the document that you have to remember is bill of entry for home consumption. Okay. Now this bill of entry can be filed in two ways. Number one, normal bill of entry. That is, when the goods are unloaded here, you file your bill of entry. Number two, you can file your bill of entry in advance, up to 30 days before the ship arrives into India. Yes, you can file in advance also, up to 30 days before the arrival of the ship or the aircraft into India. And if you file an advance bill of entry, the advantage is that the process can be completed beforehand, and as soon as the goods land, the officer will check the goods, confirm the bill of entry immediately, and you can pay the duty and remove the goods. So if you want express delivery, fast removal, then you file an advance bill. Or if you are a normal person, then go after the goods come. Let the goods come, we'll go and file the bill of entry, it will be assessed, returned to us, we'll pay the tax and clear the goods. Either or, you have the option. So you can file an advance bill or a normal bill. There are two types of bills. Second is warehousing. If you want to store your goods in a warehouse and later on, after some time, maybe 6 months, 8 months down the line, you can remove the goods, then you have to file bill of entry for warehousing. So this bill of entry is called as in bond bill of entry. Okay. In this bill also we'll have to state the value of the goods and the rate of duty applicable as of now and calculate the duty. You have to calculate the duty, but you don't have to pay the duty. You have to file a bond, an undertaking, give an undertaking that I am ready to pay this duty. So you give an undertaking. The value of undertaking has to be 3 times the duty assessed. Means if the duty assessed is say 1 lakh in this bill, on the value I'll assess the duty as 1 lakh, I'll have to give a declaration of up to 3 lakhs, an undertaking of up to 3 lakhs, thrice the amount assessed. So we'll file a bond, and then the goods will be allowed to be taken to warehouse. So there will be a warehouse where the goods will reach, and then the goods are allowed to be stored there for specific periods of time. We'll study the whole chapter warehousing after a few chapters. Okay, there is a whole chapter to be studied here, how the goods are put in the warehouse. So in that, when we'll go there, I'll tell you a lot of other details. So goods will be stored in the warehouse, and then after some time, when we want to remove the goods from the warehouse for home consumption, we will go and file another bill of entry. This time it will be called as X bond bill of entry. We'll have to file an X bond bill of entry. X bond means now it is taken out of bond. In bond means goods are going in bond. So when the goods are in warehouse, they are called as bonded warehouse. The warehouse itself is called as bonded warehouse. Goods will be called as bonded goods because they are under bond. Now when we are removing it, we'll have to pay duty. The bond will be cancelled and given back to you. So therefore it will be called as X bond bill of entry. Means removing the goods out of bond. Could be called as out bond or X bond. So here we'll have to again assess the duty. So here the actual assessment will take place, and the duty that was assessed here was only to determine the value of the bond. It was not to be paid. So in this bill the duty will be assessed, but that is only for filing the bond. Say the duty is 1 lakh, you will file a bond of 3 lakhs. But now when you file this bill of entry, we will make final assessment. This is the actual duty payable, assessment of duty payable. So here it comes to say 1,30,000. You have to pay 1,30,000, and thereafter the goods will be allowed to be removed. So goods will be removed, and your bond, the undertaking that you have given, will be cancelled. Understood? So this is how the procedure will work. The very skeleton of the procedure I have explained you. And this is actually 3/4 chapters that we'll see on this whole procedure. Right, this chapter that we are seeing will tell you about the rate of tax to be taken, rate of tax, which dates rate of tax will take, the date when you file, the date when the goods come, the date when the entry invoice is given, the date when the bill of entry is filed, and in case of warehouse, which date. Then assessment procedure, we'll see section 17, 18. Then if the goods have come in set, large number of goods have come, then how it will be determined. Section 19 is there, section 20 is there. Then there will be loss of goods and all. If the goods have come in but they have been lost in the custody of the custodian, then what will happen? So all those points, remission and all, we'll see in this chapter. Then the valuation, the whole valuation will be seen in valuation chapter, section 14, which will be amongst the assessment procedure, part of the assessment procedure, valuation. And then we'll see the warehousing procedure as a whole. Then we'll see the goods which have come and gone, the goods in transit and goods in transshipment. That whole chapter we'll see. So lot of things will come out of this single simple chart. Okay. So understood the basic working? Great. So now we can start with this chapter. So let's see, first we'll start with section 12, that is the dutiable goods. I mean to say the charging section. It says the duties of customs shall be levied. No question is going to be asked on section 12. So, levied at the rate specified under the Customs Tariff Act of 1975 or any other law for the time being in force on goods imported into or exported from India. And duty is also leviable in respect of goods belonging to government. Obviously, government goods are also chargeable to duty. I mean to say government imported goods are also chargeable to indirect tax, means to customs duty, except when the government is the consumer. If the government imports the goods for their own use, like army, navy, etc., then they normally issue the exemption notifications. Because it doesn't make sense now. Government will pay tax to whom? Government itself. So then they give exemption. So that note is given here, that there is no general exemption of goods imported by government, but imports by Indian Navy. These are examples. Then specific equipments required by police, Ministry of Defence, Coastal Guard, etc. are fully exempt from customs duty by virtue of specific notifications. So they issue notifications wherever necessary. Then comes the important section, very important, mark it is very important, section 15 and 16. Date for determination of rate of duty and tariff valuation. Tariff valuation means value fixed by the government. Value is fixed by the government, so government fixes the value by notification, and then they can issue another notification to change the value. So it keeps happening. So on which date we will consider the rate of duty? The date of filing the bill of entry, or the date of entry inwards, or the date of arrival of the ship, or the date of this, that, which date? Let's see. So section 15-16, not applicable to baggage and goods imported by post, because these are covered by separate chapters. We'll see at the almost at the end. First, goods for home consumption. Now first we'll see the imports, right? Section 15 applies to import and section 16 applies to export. Now in import, as we have seen, that there can be two types of removals. One is you file bill of entry for home consumption, second you file bill of entry for warehousing, and then you clear from warehouse at a later point of time, right? So let's see. First is goods for home consumption, means you file bill of entry for home consumption. Date of bill of entry or the date of entry inwards granted to the vessel, whichever is later. Whichever is later. Bill of entry or entry inwards, whichever is later. So in normal course, it is the bill of entry which is late. First the ship comes, it files the import manifest, then it gets the entry inwards. Once the entry inward is granted to the vessel, then you come and file your bill of entry. So normally the bill of entry will be later. So we'll take the rate as prevailing on the date of filing the bill of entry. But I just told you that you can file advance bill of entry also up to 30 days before the arrival of the ship or the aircraft. So in that case the entry inwards will be later. So then we'll take the date of entry inwards. And in case of aircraft, there is no entry inwards. Entry inwards in aircraft means the arrival of the aircraft. So this entry inwards will become arrival of the aircraft in case of aircrafts. Okay. So therefore, if you file an advance bill of entry, then we will not take the rate as on the date of bill of entry. We will take the rate of tax prevailing on the date of entry inwards or the arrival of the aircraft. Okay. So therefore, this is a summary of it. Bill of entry or entry inwards, whichever is later. Okay, very important point to remember. Bill of entry or entry inwards, whichever is later. Then goods cleared from warehouse. So as I told you that in case of goods deposited in the warehouse, the first assessment that is done at the port is only for determination of the value of the bond. It has nothing to do with payment of duty. The payment assessment is done when the goods are removed from the warehouse. So this is the ex bond bill of entry, the second one. Date of ex bond bill of entry. So you have to take the rate as prevailing on the date of filing the ex bond bill of entry, the second bill of entry, for clearance from warehouse. Simple. And for other goods. Other goods means what? How can they be other goods? Either you import directly, means home consumption, or you first put the goods in warehouse and then clear from the warehouse. So normally there are only two ways of clearing the goods. So what is the third way? Third way is smuggling. So here the other goods means the smuggled goods. That is goods which are not coming from the port. They are being imported from a beach somewhere and it is caught by the department. There is a raid and it is caught. When it is caught, assessment has to be done. So the rate of duty in that case will be taken as the rate prevailing on the date of payment of duty, means on the day of assessment, you can say. Whenever the duty is assessed, we'll take that rate into consideration. Understood? Simple. Then for export, goods for export, date of order of clearance. Date of order of clearance means when the clearance order is passed, and for other goods, the date of payment of duty. So here also the other goods means the smuggled goods, illegal goods. If they are caught, then we will assess the duty as on the date of payment of duty itself. Okay. Okay, and let me tell you in brief the export procedure also. This we had saw the we saw the import procedure. Now let me explain you the export procedure also. That is also very simple. In export, what happens is that this is the customs area, and here is the exporter. So exporter will bring the goods to the port, to the customs area basically, and he will file the export document. Now the export document is called as the shipping bill. So he'll file a shipping bill, and once the shipping bill is filed, then it will be assessed. So on the date of assessment, whatever is the rate of duty will apply, and the ship is standing here. So I'll explain the whole procedure. So you will file first the shipping bill, in which you will make your self-assessment and all. Then the ship, because you have contacted the ship in charge for carrying the goods, there is a contract here between the two people. So likewise, there may be several exporters who have entered into contract with the same ship, right, for export of the goods. So the ship in charge knows that which goods he has to take on board. So he files an application with the customs officer to allow him to board the goods. So when he files an application, and here the shipping bills are filed by all the exporters and the duties assessed, then he allows the clearance. He gives the clearance. The officer, the customs officer, clears the goods. Clears means he gives a let ship order, that is, now the goods can be loaded on the ship. So that clearance order which is given, the clearance order which is given is the date on which we will see the rate of duty. Now obviously when you are filing the shipping bill, you have to assess the duty. So you cannot wait for the clearance order. You will assume that the rate will remain same for the next 4-5 days. So you will take the present rate and assess the duty. But suppose before the clearance order is passed, if there is a change in rate, then you have to pay tax at the new rate, because the final rate that has to be taken is the rate prevailing on the date of clearance order. Okay, that is to be taken. And then once the clearance order is given, the goods will be loaded on the ship, and then the ship in charge will have to file an export manifest at the last. He has to file the export manifest, and then he will be allowed to leave India. So the departure order will be given to him. Okay, so three documents rather, have to be remembered here in export. One is the shipping bill, then clearance order, also called as the let ship order, and export manifest. Okay, great. So that is 15 and 16. And a few case laws are also given. The transaction value at the time of filing bill of entry is relevant for valuation even if there is a delay in release of impugned goods. Means sometimes there are cases prevailing, so there may be a delay in actual removal, but you have to take the value which is prevailing at the time of filing the bill of entry. Like sometimes it may take months together, and during these months when the goods are lying at the port or maybe the warehouse, the value may increase. But will you have to pay tax on increased value? No. We have to stick to the value at the time of filing the bill of entry. So whatever was the transaction value at the time of bill of entry, that will prevail even afterwards. It will not be changed. Then the relevant date for levy of interest is the date of payment of duty and not the date of presentation of TR6 challan for clearance of goods. If the interest is chargeable, we'll see this section 47. Section 47 you can mention here. We'll see how the interest is calculated. So it is up to the date of payment of duty. If you suppose submit a TR6 challan, TR6 is the old challan, now it is GAR7 challan, GAR7. This is a very old case. 2008 is the judgment of Allahabad High Court, but the case refers to even before that. Consider 10 years before minimum. It takes around 10-12 years to reach High Court. Okay, so at that time it was TR6 challan. So you have submitted the challan, but you haven't paid the amount, and you pay the amount later on at some point of time. So interest will continue till you pay, obviously. And another case is there. This is also 2008 Supreme Court. The imported goods cleared for home consumption under section 46. Section 46 is the bill of entry section. We'll see in detail later on. Upon payment of duty, such goods are continued to be held in the warehouse under an application under 49 and subsequently removed from home consumption. The relevant date for levy of levy is the date of obtaining clearance under section 46 and not the actual date of removal. So 46 means the bill of entry. So we have to take the date as of the bill of entry, not the date of actual clearance, which can be at a later point of time. Then we'll see two sections, section 17 and section 18. These are very important sections, mark them as very important, and they talk about the assessment of duty. Okay, so first we'll start with section 17. Section 17 says that when you file your bill of entry, the goods are imported into India and the assessee files the bill of entry. So in that bill of entry, he has to make a self-assessment of duty. Self-assessment means you yourself have to assess the duty payable on the imported goods or the export goods, as the case may be. And you have to mention that assessment in the bill of entry itself. There is a column of assessment there. You have to enter the details. So that is the first point. An importer entering any imported goods under section 46 means entering any goods means filing bill of entry, or an exporter entering the export goods under section 50 means filing the shipping bill. We'll see this chapter later on. Okay, so you'll understand the names of the documents. But when you export the goods, you have to file a shipping bill. And when you import the goods, you have to file bill of entry, right? Shall self-assess the duty, if any, leviable on such goods. Exception is stores. When you import stores into India, stores means items which are to be supplied to foreign going vessels or aircrafts, like chocolates imported and biscuits imported and fuel imported and lot of things which are imported and which are meant to be supplied to these foreign going ships or aircrafts. So you don't want to clear them into India, you are importing it and then you will supply it back to these ships, foreign ships that come to India. So these stores, when imported, are not assessed to duty at all. They can be imported and at the same time they can be supplied as ship stores without payment of any import duty, and therefore there is no assessment required thereon. No self-assessment, no officer will assess. So exception is stores which are allowed to be warehouse. They can be kept in warehouse without assessment of duty under section 85. Section 85 is the section applicable to stores. So there is a special chapter of ship stores. We'll study it later on. Okay, so you have made the self-assessment and you have mentioned the self-assessment in the bill of entry, right? Now what the officer will do? Let's see. Verification. Verification by the proper officer. The proper officer may verify the entries made under section 46 or 50 and the self-assessment of such goods, and for this purpose examine or test any imported or export goods or such part thereof as may be necessary. Means he can examine and test the goods also. It can be chemical testing, physical testing, any kind of examination and testing can be carried out to ascertain that the entries that you have made in section 46 means in the bill of entry is correct, provided that The selection of cases for verification shall primarily be on the basis of risk evaluation through appropriate selection criteria. Means how to select the sample for testing. So that will be as per the selection criteria, and the selection criteria will also be notified by the government from time to time. It is called as risk evaluation through appropriate selection criteria. So this language is, you can say, audit language, right? Good. Then for the purpose of verification of self-assessment, the proper officer may require the importer, exporter or any other person like agents to produce any document or information. So they can call for documents and information whereby the duty leviable on the imported goods or the export goods, as the case may be, can be ascertained. Like he can call for the invoice, he can call for the catalogs, he can call for various contracts and so on and so forth. And thereupon the importer, exporter or the other person shall produce a document or furnish such information. Obviously, once it is called for, you have to furnish. Then reassessment, where it is found on verification, examination or testing of the goods or otherwise means on any other ground, that the self-assessment is not done properly, your self-assessment is not correct, then what he will do? The officer may reassess the duty leviable on such goods. Now, before we move ahead, let me tell you one thing. See, I am filing the bill of entry. The goods have come, they have been kept in the customs area, right? The ship in charge has unloaded the goods in the customs area. Now I go for clearance of goods, I am the importer. So when I file the bill of entry, I have to make self-assessment, and at the same time we'll study in section 46 and 47 later on in a few lectures to come. I'll tell you there that you have to pay the duty also along with the bill of entry. So I am filing my bill of entry. As per my own self-assessment, the duty payable comes to 2,76,000. So I have to pay that 2,76,000 and then file the bill of entry, right? So bill of entry is filed and payment is done along with it. So that payment has already been made. Now the officer finds that my self-assessment is not properly done. So he will reassess, and on reassessment, if any additional duty comes, then I'll have to pay that also. So therefore this is called as reassessment, because self-assessment duty has already been paid. So therefore now this is called as reassessment of duty. So he'll reassess the duty leviable. In addition, he is free to take any other action which may be taken under the act. Means if you have done some fraud or anything else, smuggling, then he will take other actions like confiscation, penalty and so on and so forth. Then where any reassessment is done contrary to the self-assessment done by the importer-exporter, and where the importer-exporter does not confirm this said reassessment in writing, means the importer or the exporter is not agreeing with this reassessment, he says that no, the officer is wrong, then the proper officer shall pass a speaking order, means order in writing with reasons on the reassessment within 15 days from the date of reassessment of the bill of entry or the shipping bill, as the case may be. So he has to pass a speaking order, means an order in writing giving reasons for the adjustments made. So reasons for what I can say assessment, reasons for reassessment. So whatever adjustments he does, suppose he increases the value or he applies a different rate of duty or whatever he's done, whatever he's doing here in reassessment, whatever changes he's making, he has to give reasons for the same and then pass an order in writing. This is required because if the assessee wants to go into appeal to Commission Appeals, Tribunal, High Court, Supreme Court later on, then how does the appellate authority, how will they come to know the reasons for the adjustments made? if this order is not passed, then how will the appellate authority come to know the reasons, and how will they decide whether those reasons are right or wrong? So therefore an order in writing will be required. But if the assessee confirms, if the importer exporter confirms, he says that okay, I agree with the adjustments, then there is no need for speaking order, because if he is agreeing to it, then he will not going to appeal also. Okay, so basically the reassessment is done on bill of entry itself, bill of entry or shipping bill itself. So there is a column there, column of self-assessment, and then if he makes some changes, he will make the changes there only and reassess the duty payable, and he will hand over the bill of entry to you, and you will then go and pay the additional amount. So that is the normal routine. But if you don't confirm to that, if you say that no, I am not agreeing to it, though I will have to pay, you have asked, I have pay, I will pay it, but I am paying it under protest, I am not agreeing to these adjustments, I am not agreeing to the increase in the duty, then the officer will have to pass an order in writing. Understood? So that is section 17 basically, very simple one, assessment, self-assessment and then reassessment. Then comes section 18. Achha, one more point you should remember, that section 17 is applicable for both import as well as export. Okay, yes. Then comes section 18, that is called as provisional assessment of duty. Now as the name suggests, provisional means not final. It is for the time being. So why this happens, let me tell you. It's a very simple concept. Suppose you are unable to determine the value of the goods, you are unable to determine the rate of duty applicable to the goods, or you are waiting for some documents to come, then only you will be able to file a normal bill of entry, and therefore the assessment cannot be done immediately. So due to many reasons, it is possible that you are unable to make a self-assessment of your duty, and therefore you will not be able to pay the correct amount. But if you let your goods be kept on the port for a long time, then heavy demurrage charges are levied by the authorities there. So you cannot keep for long, you have to clear it immediately. And even I need my goods, immediately. My raw material, it is my raw material which is imported into India, and my factory is shut for quite some days. I want to clear the goods immediately, so I cannot wait. But then I am not having the documents, I am not having the information, so what to do? So then comes the concept of provisional assessment. So what this section says, that okay, you are unable to determine the duty, no problem, make an application to the officer that due to these reasons I am not able to assess my correct amount of duty, so please allow me to remove the goods on provisional basis. So then officer will tell you how much duty you should pay. Said that okay, you pay 10 lakhs as provisional duty. So officer will apply his mind, if any, and determine that okay, what is the maximum amount that can go. Suppose he feels that the total duty, maximum duty can come to 15 lakhs, but normally it should come to 10 lakhs. So he will ask you to pay 10 lakhs as provisional duty and remove the goods, but he will also ask you to file a bond. Okay, so he will ask you to file a bond. Bond is for covering that difference that may arise on finalization of assessment. So he'll ask you to file a bond of 5 lakhs, that you pay duty of 10 lakhs and file a bond of 5 lakhs. Now bond means what? Bond means an undertaking. So he needs me, the importer, to give an undertaking. He means the officer will ask the assessee to give an undertaking to pay 5 lakhs if the need arises. If the need arises on finalization of assessment. If need doesn't arise, then okay, no problem. But if need arises, means if the final duty assessed is more, you agree to pay it. So file this undertaking. So we have to give that undertaking along with bank guarantee. Okay. So what the importer has to do, he has to make an application for provisional assessment. Officer will tell him how much to pay and how much bond he should file. So I'll do both of the things. I'll pay the provisional duty, I'll file the bond, and then the goods will be cleared. I can take the goods, I can enjoy the goods. And then after some time, when I get all the documents and all which will enable me to assess the duty, I'll go and file those documents. And once the documents are filed, then the finalization will take place. And finalization can result in either increase or decrease. If the duty increases, I will pay the difference. If it reduces, I'll get the refund. Simple. Okay, so let's study this section. It's a very simple concept. But a lot of small questions can come in this section. The first is the purpose of making provisional assessment. So here the question will come that for what purposes provisional assessment can be done. So it says the proper officer may assess the duty provisionally. Who assesses it? The officer provisionally in the following cases. A. Where the importer or exporter is unable to make self-assessment under section 17 and makes a request in writing to the officer for provisional assessment. Or number 2, where the proper officer deems it necessary to subject any imported goods or export goods to any chemical or other test. Now see, this is a reverse case. Assessee has done self-assessment and he has filed the bill of entry. So there is no problem from assessee's point of view. But officer says that no, there is something wrong. I want to put your goods to chemical or other test. I want to test your goods. And the test will take its own sweet time. It will take 15 days for the result to come, and then we will assess your duty. So should the goods be kept at the port for 15 days? No, then he will tell you that okay, I will make a provisional assessment. You can remove the goods, but file a bond, and we will finalize it later on. Thirdly, where the importer or the exporter has produced all the documents. See, importer, exporter has produced all the necessary documents and furnished full information. But the officer deems it necessary to make further inquiry. So this is again from department side. Officer says that no. I will like to make further inquiries. It will take time. So we'll do provisional assessment. Or lastly, where necessary documents have not been produced. Whatever documents the officer has called for, as we have seen in section 17, he can call for documents, but you are unable to produce those documents or submit the information. Okay, or information has not been furnished and the officer deems it necessary to make further inquiry. So in all these cases, he can resort to provisional assessment. So what you have to do, let's see. The importer shall file the bill of entry for such imported goods under section 46. The importer or the exporter shall pay the duty so assessed. So assessed means provisionally assessed. So whatever provisional duty is assessed by the officer, provisional duty is not self-assessed. Provisional duty is assessed by the officer. So that we'll have to pay. And furnish such security, means the bond, as the officer deems fit for the payment of deficiency, if any, between the duty as may be finally assessed and the duty provisionally assessed. So whatever difference is assumed to arise, you will have to give security for that. Means you have to file a bond along with bank guarantee. And in case of warehouse goods, the importer shall execute a bond equal to thrice the amount of the duty provisionally assessed. If you are warehousing the goods, because there is a warehousing bond. Anyways, when we put the goods in warehouse, you have to file a bond, and that bond is equal to thrice the duty assessed. Even in normal case, if I am filing a bill of entry for warehousing and I am warehousing the goods, if the duty is say 10 lakhs, we have to file a bond of 30 lakhs. So even in this case is a provisional this thing. So in case of warehouse goods, you don't have to pay the duty. So this is payment is required when you have filed the bill of entry for home consumption. So if the bill of entry is for home consumption, then you have to pay the duty provisionally assessed plus file the bond for the difference, if any. The bond is only to cover the difference. But in case of warehouse goods, whatever duty is assessed provisionally, you have to file thrice bond. Means the bond value should be 3 times of the duty provisionally assessed. Let me tell you how it happens. Like the provisional assessment is say 10 lakhs. Now if you have filed a bill of entry for home consumption, then what you have to do is you have to pay 10 lakhs as provisional duty plus file a bond of amount to cover the difference. So if the officer feels, proper officer, he feels, this is feeling, this is all estimation, estimates that the final duty can go up to 15 lakhs, can go up to 15 lakhs. If this is his feeling, then I'll have to file a bond of 5 lakhs to cover this difference. So this is in case of home consumption. You pay 10 lakhs and file a bond of the difference of pay 10 lakhs and file a bond of 5 lakhs. But if this is a bill of entry for warehousing, means we have entered the goods for warehousing, then you don't pay anything right now. You just file a bond which is called as a warehousing bond of 10 into 3 is equal to 30 lakhs. So I'll have to straight away file a bond of 30 lakhs. That is it, nothing more. Okay, understood? Good. Then comes the final assessment. So after the provisional assessment is done, the goods will either be removed for home consumption or for warehousing. Done, that is finished. Now once the documents and information arrives, we'll apply for final assessment. So let's go for final assessment. So what it says, if any document or information is required by the officer for final assessment, the importer, exporter, as the case may be, shall submit such documents or information, obviously, and the proper officer shall finalize the provisional assessment within such time and in such manner as may be prescribed. That is also okay. There are prescribed times. And in the case of goods cleared for home consumption or exportation, the amount paid shall be adjusted against the duty finally assessed. Amount paid means the amount that was paid provisionally, 10 lakhs that we had paid, will be adjusted towards the final assessment or reassessed, and the shortfall or excess shall be paid or refunded as the case may be. Simple. If there is a shortfall in payment, if the final is more than provisional, there is a shortfall, so you have to pay for it. And if the provisional was more and the final assessment is less, you will get the refund. And in case of warehouse goods, what will happen? Where the duty finally assessed or reassessed is in excess of the duty provisionally assessed, the importer shall execute a bond twice the amount of the excess duty. Now this twice is actually wrongly written in the law. It should also be thrice the amount of excess duty, because warehousing bond is thrice. Okay, so as I explained here, so what happens, this was provisional assessment, so you paid 10 lakhs and filed a bond of 5 lakhs. Now if final assessment is only 7, so you have paid 10, so you will get refund of 3. If the final is 13, you will have to pay 3 lakhs. So in this case, you either take refund or make payment as the case may be, and then this bond will be cancelled and handed back to you. But in case of warehousing, what happens is that this is the original bond that we had filed, thrice the amount of duty. Now at the port itself, on finalization, if the duty that was assessed here at 10 lakhs is increased to 13 lakhs, then what you have to do is, you don't have to pay anything. You are not removing the goods right now. The goods have gone into warehouse and they are still in the warehouse. But at the port, this 10 lakh provisional amount increases to 13. Then you have to file additional bond of the increases of 3 lakhs. So 3 into thrice is equal to 9 lakhs. So you have to increase the value of bond basically. When the duty was assessed at 10, you have filed a bond of 30. So when the duty is increased by 3, you have to file an additional bond of thrice of the increase. Right? Simple. So this is not clearance from warehouse. The goods are still in the warehouse. Let me explain, because some students don't understand this point. This is the port, this is the warehouse. Okay. So when goods came here, first there was a provisional assessment of 10, so we filed a bond of 30. Okay, and the goods went to warehouse. So goods are lying in the warehouse. Then when this provisional was finalized, okay, and finalization is 13, so we'll again file a bond, additional bond of 9. Okay, so this is happening at the port only, and the goods are still in the warehouse. So this happens at the port. You have to file bond of 30 and then further bond of 9. And then later on, when you will when you want to remove the goods from the warehouse, you will have to file another bill of entry for clearance from warehouse, right? So you will file another bill of entry for home consumption here, and then the duty will be assessed again, and this assessment is the final assessment. So if here the assessment is say 15, this is the amount that you have to pay finally, and when you pay this amount and clear the goods, then these bonds, either a single bond or the additional bond, will get cancelled. Okay, so that is the complete procedure. So filing additional bond doesn't mean clearance, right? Very good. So come back. So that is the case. And then interest is also given, that in case of excess duty, means when you have to pay the additional amount, in case of home consumption, you have to pay 15% interest also from the first day of the month in which the duty is provisionally assessed till the date of payment thereof. 15% interest is charged from the first day of the month in which the duty is provisionally assessed, not from the date of payment of provisional duty. So like for example, if the provisional assessment, PA means provisional assessment, was done on 17th of January, okay, and the final assessment is done on 13th of June, okay, and then you pay on 17th of June, okay. So interest will come from not 17th January. Interest will not be applied from 17th January. Interest will be applicable from 1st of January. So interest will apply from 1st of January to 17th of June. Interest at the rate of 15% per annum. On what? On the difference between final and provisional. So if the provisional was 10 and final is 13, so you have to pay that 3 lakhs extra. So that 3 lakhs will be subject to interest at the rate of 15% per annum from 1st January. See, first day of the month in which the duty is provisionally assessed. So if the duty is provisionally assessed in the month of January, interest will start from 1st of Jan till the date of payment. And if the duty comes down, then they will give us the refund. So on refund they will give us interest. Interest will be 6% per annum. But see the timing. After after 3 months from the date of assessment. Now this assessment means final assessment, not provisional. 3 months from the date of final assessment till the date of refund of such amount. Means see, on 17 Jan there was provisional assessment, we paid 10 lakhs. Now if the final assessment is say 6 lakhs, so we are entitled for 4 lakhs of refund. They will not give us interest from 17 Jan. They will not even give us interest from 13 June. 13 June is final assessment. Now the government has another 3 months to grant us refund. So from 13 June to 13 July, 13th August, 13th September. So these are the 3 months allowed to government to give us refund. If they refund us that 4 lakhs by 13th of September, then there is no interest. No interest at all. If they give us a refund after 13th September, that is 3 months from finalization, then they will pay us interest from 14th September to the date of refund. So when they charge interest from us, they are charging from 1st of January. And when they give us interest, it is after 3 months from finalization of assessment. Lot of injustice. And for refund and interest thereon, write it like that, refund and interest thereon, there is concept of unjust enrichment. For all refunds, there is a concept of unjust enrichment. It's a very simple concept. What it says is, unjust means not justified. Enrichment means to enrich yourself. See, I am importer. I paid the provisional duty, I cleared the goods. After clearance, I might have sold off the goods. And when I sold off the goods, I might have recovered the duty which I already paid. So I paid 10 lakhs of duty, I cleared the goods, I sold off the goods, and on sale I have already recovered that 10 lakh of duty from the buyer. Means I have transferred the burden of tax, the burden of duty to the buyer, which happens in indirect taxes. Okay, so if I have done that, and later on it is found that this 10 lakhs was on the higher side, the final assessment is done at 6 lakhs. So 4 lakhs becomes refundable. Who will be entitled to this refund? The importer who had paid that 10 lakhs. Will I claim that refund and will I get that refund? If I get it, then I will be unjustly enriched, because that money has not gone out of my pocket. I have already recovered it from the buyer. So the burden has been shifted. So if the refund is to be granted, who should get that refund? The buyer, not the importer, right? So this concept is written here. How it is written? See, it says, the amount of duty refundable and interest thereon shall, instead of being credited to the fund, wait a second, now I'll explain this point also. So what this says is that we'll give the refund to the importer. Importer will be an importer or the exporter will be entitled for refund only if he proves that he has not passed on the burden to the other person. So for example, if I have imported these goods for my personal use, then obviously I have not shifted the burden to anyone, because they are meant for my own use. I am not reselling it. If I am not reselling the goods, I have not shifted the burden. So then I will get the refund. Or even if they are my stock in trade, I have imported stock in trade of my business. If I prove that I have not yet resold these goods, they are still lying with me in my stock, then yes, I will get the refund. Or even if I have sold, but I have made a contract with the buyer in which I have clearly written that right now the duty is provisionally assessed, so I am not passing on the burden to you. I will pass on the burden when finalization takes place, when the duty gets finally assessed. Then whatever amount is assessed, then I will recover that amount from you. So I am not recovering it right now at the time of sale. So if I can show this contract to the proper officer that look, I have not transferred the burden, I will transfer the burden only when finalization takes place, then I am entitled for refund. So somehow I have to prove that I have not passed on the burden. Or if I have passed on the burden, then the buyer is entitled to claim the refund. The buyer will come and prove that he has not further passed on the burden and therefore he is entitled to refund. So he'll get the refund in that case. And suppose if the burden has passed on to a consumer whom we don't know. I have transferred the burden to a reseller has further transferred it to somebody, and then he has further transferred it, and then we don't know to whom the burden has been shifted to. Who is that poor guy? We don't know. Nobody knows. Nothing on record. Then this amount which is refundable will be credited to a fund called as Consumer Welfare Fund. I will not get the refund, nor the buyer, because he has shifted the burden further. And to whom the burden is shifted, we don't know. So then the amount is transferred to Consumer Welfare Fund. So therefore this section is written like this. So the section says, it is indirect way of saying it. It is a negative sentence. It says it will not be credited to the fund but granted to the importer exporter in the following cases. Means in these following cases it will be granted to importer exporter or the buyer. In all other cases it will be credited to the fund. Understood? Good. So it says that in the following cases it will be granted to the applicant and not credited to the fund. So what are these cases? Number one, if he has not passed on the incidence means the burden of such duty and interest to any other person. Simple. Number two, imports made by an individual for his personal use. If the goods are for personal use, there is no question of shifting the burden. Or if the buyer, this is a case where buyer claims the refund and he proves that he has not passed on the incidence to any other person. Then export duty as specified in section 26, this we'll study later on. Right now you will not understand this, but when we'll see section 26 you will understand. And drawback of duty, there is a whole chapter that we have to study, duty drawback, under section 74 and 75. So in these two cases also, the refund is granted to applicant. And not credited to the fund. So these are, you can say, some export benefits which are directly given to the applicant. Then there is another circular given here which we call as voluntary payment before final assessment. Now what this means I'll explain you with this example. We have just written this example. Now see what happens here is that when the finalization takes place and then we pay the duty, we have to pay interest right from 1st of January to this date. So it becomes a big burden, right? So suppose if provisional assessment is done on 17 Jan, 10 lakh, I pay 10 lakhs. But after few days I come to know that my final duty may increase by 7 to 8 lakhs. Why to wait for finalization of assessment? Because it will take its own time. Can I not go and deposit that 7 lakhs voluntarily? So law says yes, you can. Why not? Nobody is stopping you. So you can deposit. And if you deposit that amount in between the provisional and final assessment, somewhere here, if I deposit a voluntary amount, then what will happen is that interest burden will get reduced, because on this amount deposited interest will be charged only from 1st of Jan till this date and not up to here, not up to finalization. So no interest will be charged after this date, that is after I deposit the amount voluntarily. So I will save interest, so that you can do. So that is what the circular says. See, voluntary payment before final assessment, that such duty should be paid along with interest at 15%. So I will deposit an additional amount along with 15% interest. time will be same from the first day of the month in which the duty is provisionally assessed, means in our example 1st of January, till the date of payment thereof, till I deposit that amount. So I'll pay that interest at 15%. And then on finalization, no additional interest will come on this amount that I have already deposited. Then the terms and conditions of the bond and the amount of security furnished will remain same. So even if I deposit this additional amount, the bond value will not get changed, nor the bank guarantee. All those things will remain same. And no refund can be claimed till finalization. Suppose if I deposit this additional amount today and then next day I feel, oh, why have I deposited, let's claim refund. No. Once you deposit the additional amount, you cannot claim refund of it till the finalization. So that amount will get blocked. And the importer exporter in such a case shall not incur the interest on the amount of duty so paid for the period from the date of such payment till finalization of assessment. So that future interest will get saved. And the amount of duty provisionally paid or paid in the interim period and interest paid, if any, shall be adjusted against the duty finally assessed, obviously. Then there's another circular 38/16 which says that wherever duty is to be assessed provisionally, the importer shall execute a bond. So this is for the bond. Execute a bond in the prescribed form for the purpose of undertaking to pay on demand the deficiency, if any, between the duty as may be finally assessed and the duty provisionally assessed. So you have to execute a bond and furnish prescribed amount of security for the payment of duty deficiency. No sureties shall be obtained, and the security to be obtained shall be in the form of a bank guarantee, as I told you, or cash deposit. You can deposit cash also, as convenient to the importer. So that is simple. And then there is another section, (99A). This is called as audit. It says the proper officer may carry out audit of assessments of imported goods or export goods or of an auditee under this act, either in his office or in the premises of the auditee, in such manner as may be prescribed. Means the assessments which have been done under section 17 basically, or finalization under 18. After it is finalized, they can be audited. Proper officer has the power to audit those assessments, either by calling the assessee to his office, or he will go to the auditee's place and do these assessments, the audits. And the explanation says that for the purpose of this section, auditee means a person who is subject to an audit under this section and includes an importer, exporter or custodian approved under section 45, the custodian of goods, custodian who takes the goods in his custody at the port or the airports, or the licensee of warehouse. Warehouse can also be audited, and any other person concerned directly or indirectly in clearing, forwarding, stocking, carrying, selling or purchasing imported goods or export goods or dutiable goods. So any of these persons can become an auditee. Means the officer can go to any of these persons' place and audit. So this is called as departmental audit. They can do it anytime. Then comes section 19. So a lot of questions can come on section 18, because as I told you, questions will be very short, 2 marks, 3 marks each at the max. So you cannot expect the whole section 18 to be asked. They'll ask you about interest payable on finalization of assessment. You will be asked about this interim deposit, what will happen in case of interim deposit, how the interest will be calculated, or you will be asked about the bond to be filed, any small topic out of the whole section. Or the purposes. The very important question is the purposes for which the provisional assessment can be done. The first 4 points that we had seen. Okay, now coming to section 19, determination of duty in case of import of articles in set. If you are importing articles in set, if you are importing articles in set, then how the duty will be assessed? So let's see. The problem of article in set is that number one, you don't know the values separately. Okay, you don't know the values separately. And secondly rather, you don't know the values separately, and since you don't know the values separately, each item has its own rate of duty applicable. Like for example, you have imported 5 articles in one set. 5 articles in one set. Like there can be a chocolate box. You have imported a chocolate box which contains 5 different varieties of chocolates. And each of these chocolates is given in the tariff and has a different rate. It has a different rate. Okay, so there are 5 articles, each one has a different rate. You have imported in set. Now the question is, the value available is of this set and not of individual items. So then what rate to apply? So let's see what section 19 says. So it says that if these articles in set are liable to duty based on quantity, means if these articles are liable to specific duty. Specific duty is on quantity basis, 10 rupees per kg, 5 rupees per kilogram, and so on and so forth. Kg and kilogram is same, I know, means milliliter or liter or something like that. So if the rates are based on quantity, then on whole value at the applicable rates. Now you know the quantity now. Even if the things are brought in a set, but you know their quantity, 250 grams item A, 500 grams item B, 600 grams item C, and so forth. You know. And if the duty is on quantity basis, you can identify each quantity and you can charge the duty accordingly. So there is no problem. You charge it and then take the total. Problem arises when the duty is chargeable on value basis. Second point, if it is based on value ad valorem, and if the rate is same for all articles, if all the articles, say I have imported 10 different varieties of chocolate and all the varieties are chargeable at the same rate, that is 25%, then again there is no problem. We know the whole value of the set consisting of 10 articles, but all of them are chargeable at same rate, so apply that rate to the whole value. Simple. So first point, on all articles at the applicable rate, means value of the whole set will be chargeable at that rate. But if they are chargeable at different rates, say there are 10 different varieties of chocolates and each is chargeable at a different rate, ranging from 2%, 5%, 6%, 10%, 15%, 20%, and 25%. There are different rates. Then see what it says. On all articles, it means that the total value of the whole set, which is comprised of all the articles, at the highest applicable rate. At the highest applicable rate, you apply the highest rate to the full value of that chocolate box. So what will happen here? Even if some chocolate is exempt, it will also become chargeable to tax, because it says all the articles. So even if one of the item is exempt, it will also become chargeable to tax. If some item is chargeable at nil rate, it will also become chargeable to tax at the highest rate. And if the articles are chargeable at 2, 4 and 6 and 8 and 10%, they will all become chargeable at 25%, because one item was chargeable at 25%. So then the exception is given. Exception is simple. To avoid this problem, what you do is you submit the evidence to the officer and satisfy him regarding the values of each individual article separately. You prove that what is the value of A and what is the value of B and what is the value of C and D and E and F and so on and so forth. So if you prove this, then each article, the value of each article will be charged separately. Simple. So that is given there. If the importer produces evidence to the satisfaction of the proper officer, or the evidence is available regarding value of any of the articles liable to different rates, such article shall be chargeable to duty separately at the rate applicable to it. So now you can show the different value for some of the articles or all of them. If you show for some, then those will be charged separately, the remaining will be charged at the highest rate. And if you show the value for each item separately, then each item, each article will be charged separately. Simple. And note is given in situation 2b. 2b means this one, 2b, the highest rate wala case. Even if some articles are not liable to duty, that is assessed at nil rate, they will become liable to duty at the highest applicable rate. So that is one problem. So the problem lies in this. Okay, like example I can give you, that if this set comprises of articles A, B, C, D and E, okay, and this is the whole set. The whole set is imported for 10,000 rupees, okay, and you don't know the values separately. So then in that case what happens is that the total value of 10,000 will become chargeable at the highest rate. So let's see the rates of tax applicable. A is chargeable at 8%, B is chargeable at 12%, C is chargeable at 15%, but is exempt under a notification. D is chargeable at nil rate and E is chargeable at 20%. So the highest rate is 20%. So the duty payable would be 10,000 full into 20%, means 2,000. %20 will be applied straight away to full 10,000 rupees. So that means that the value of D, which is comprised in this 10,000, and the value of C, which is there in 10,000, will also become chargeable to tax at the highest rate. Now to avoid this situation, what you do? You show the value separately. If you prove the value of individual items separately, then each item will be charged at the respective rates. So C will become exempt and D will be nil. So you will save tax. Okay, understood? Very simple point. And a practical question comes on this section. This is also a very important section. Many questions have been asked in the past exams. And the second part of this section deals with accessories and spares which are imported along with the main goods. Like you are importing car and you import tool kit along with the car. So accessories or spares which are imported along with the main goods, how will they be taxed? So it says that accessories, spares, etc. get the classification of the main item or equipment, means the rate which is applicable to the main article will apply to accessories also. If they are supplied with such main article, no separate charge is made for such accessories, means the value of the car includes these accessories and their price is included in the price of the main item. Simple. So if the price is inclusive price, no separate charge is made, then we will apply the rate of car to the accessories also, means the complete value will be charged at the car rate applicable to main item. Very simple. Then comes another section, section 20. Re-importation of goods produced or manufactured in India. Interesting one. It says that if we have got some goods which are exported from India initially, means goods are manufactured in India and they are exported. Okay, they are exported out of India. After some time it is re-imported into India. That re-import can be for two things, either just for repairs and renewal and after that it will be again re-exported, or number two, it is permanently coming back to India. So the re-importation can be in two ways: temporary re-importation, means for repairs etc., and then it will go back, or it is permanently coming back to India, return to India, and now it will stay in India only. So in these two cases what to do, let's see in this section. So we have section and then we have notification, concession notification. Let's study. So the section is very simple. It's just one line. It says if the goods are exported out of India are re-imported, then such re-imported goods shall be charged to duty as if it is fresh imports. So the section clearly states that as if it is fresh import. Consider it to be fresh import. So apply full. It means you apply full import duty. So for example, we have exported auto rickshaws from India. Bajaj company has made auto rickshaws in India and they have exported these auto rickshaws, okay, to which country? England, UK, United Kingdom. And after some days they are returned back to India, so they are coming back to India. So when they come back, we will assume it to be importation of auto rickshaws and will charge full import duty rate as it would apply to normal imported auto rickshaws. Okay, so it says considered to be fresh import, charge full duty. Then there are two cases also given there. Let's see those cases and then we'll see the exemption or concession notification. In Tata Tea Limited versus CC, CC stands for Commissioner of Custom. Commissioner of Custom. It's a old case, 1999. Supreme Court 3-member bench. It was held that duty is payable on re-import of machinery which was sent abroad for repairs. Section itself says that if you send the machinery outside India for repairs and then you re-import it into India, it will be chargeable to duty again. Okay. Secondly, in super cassettes industries, actually this case is not applicable now because it was for CVD of excise and CVD of excise is gone. We have seen 3.1. So, okay, I'll explain the logic of it. It was held that CVD cannot be imposed, CVD means CVD of excise, cannot be imposed on re-import of goods if they are re-imported after repairs and when the article retains original identity. Now I'll explain the logic, then we'll strike it off. There's no need to read this, but understand the logic. CVD of excise was imposed on imported goods earlier days, before GST days. So before GST, CVD of excise was levied on imported goods. What is the event of taxation of excise? Or rather what was the event of taxation for excise duty? Manufacturing of goods. It was manufacturing of goods. So here the case arose that first we imported some goods. Manufactured goods were imported into India. So if manufactured goods were imported into India, you had to pay basic custom duty as well as CVD of excise. So you paid both. Then you exported the goods again for some repairs and all. When after repairs the goods are coming back to India for the second time, import duty will be charged, basic custom duty will be charged. What about the CVD of excise? Will it be charged again? The court said no. Why? Because there was no remanufacturing outside India, it was only repairs. If you remanufacture the goods, then excise duty will be charged again. But if there is no remanufacturing, if it is only repairs and not remanufacturing, then excise cannot be charged for the second time. So custom duty will be charged for the second time because every import is liable to custom duty. It is not that if something is imported, you have to pay import duty and then you take it outside India and bring it back, then no import duty will be charged. It is not like that. You go and watch a movie, every time you go to watch a movie, you have to pay the fees. Every time you catch a train for going somewhere, you have to buy the ticket. Or is it so that we have bought ticket once, so we'll never buy it in lifetime? You have to buy every time because a new taxable event is happening. So if something is imported into India, you have to pay basic custom duty. If you take it back and bring it again, you have to again pay basic custom duty because the event of taxation is repeating. If the event of taxation repeats, you have to pay the tax again. So it is a case of reimportation. So basic custom duty will become chargeable because event of taxation of the basic custom duty is importation. If importation happens again, you have to pay the tax again. But CVD of excise was on manufacturing, not just import, but manufacturing and then import. So there is no remanufacturing, there is no manufacturing for the second time, so there will be no CVD on reimportation of goods. So that's what was held by CGAT. CGAT was the name for tribunal. Old name for tribunal was CGAT. It was a short form of Customs, Excise and Gold Appellate Tribunal. So now that name is gone. Then came CESTAT. After CGAT, it was named as CESTAT, that is Customs, Excise and Service Tax Appellate Tribunal. Now even the service tax and excise is gone. So now the new name is the GST Tribunal, you can say. Okay, but let's see. So forget the name, you don't have to do anything with the name. But you now strike off this because CVD of excise has gone. Now it is replaced by GST. GST is on supply. It has nothing to do with remanufacturing. So whether you remanufacture or you don't remanufacture, there is a supply. Every supply is liable to GST. So the concept of GST is different than the concept of excise duty. So you can strike off this case. Then coming to concessions in this regard. So first government said that if there is an import, charge full duty. But in Hindi there is one saying, I'll repeat in Hindi, though this is not a Hindi lecture, but I hope you can understand. And then I'll repeat in English also. सुबह का भूला शाम को वापस आ जाए तो उसको भूला नहीं कहते. And you must have heard this in movies also, that if a man who runs away from home in the morning, but if he comes back in the evening, then you don't call him as a lost person. He is welcome back home. Okay, he is welcome back. So this notification speaks about the same thing. If we have exported some goods out of India, but they are returned back to India, then don't consider them to be imported goods. They are our goods only, na. They are our family members only. They just gone outside India, now they are coming back. So consider them to be our own goods, consider them to be domestic goods. Please don't consider them as imported goods. So government says, okay, no problem. We'll consider them to be domestic goods. We'll not consider them to be imported goods. So we will not charge import duty. But wait a second. When you exported these goods, you had claimed various benefits, export benefits. You had claimed refund of GST and refund of excise duty earlier on and refund of all taxes. You had claimed the export benefits. Now you are saying that this is domestic goods, this is not imported. So okay, if this is not imported, then it is not exported also. So return the export benefits that we have given you. Come on. So government says, okay, we will not charge import duty as per the rate given in Customs Tariff Act, but you have to pay the amount of export benefits that you had received when you exported these goods. If you do so, then we will not charge the import duty. So it's a settlement case. Okay, so that's one point we'll see. And the other one is that if the goods are coming back to India for just repairs, like we had exported the auto rickshaws, and they are coming back only temporarily for repairs and all, and then they will go back. So when they are coming in, you will not be charged any import duty because you are going to export them back again after some time. So you just file a bond, you bring the goods, repair them and re-export it within given time. If you do so, then the bond will be cancelled. No import duty, no export duty, nothing. So let's see. Notification 45 by 2017. The central government hereby exempts the goods falling within any chapter of the first schedule. The goods can be anything. It can be auto rickshaw, it can be machinery, it can be bicycle, it can be anything, any damn goods. And specified in column 2 of the table below, when re-imported into India from so much of the BCD, that is basic custom duty, and integrated tax, compensation cess leviable thereon, as is in excess of the amount indicated in the corresponding entry in column 3. It means BCD, integrated tax, compensation cess will be restricted to the amount mentioned in column 3. Whatever is in excess of this will be exempted. Okay, so what is this? This is the export benefits that you had claimed. So that means that you have to pay the export benefits. See, it is given there, serial number 1. Goods exported under claim for drawback. So these are now the whole list of export benefits that you have claimed when the goods were exported out of India. And column 3 says that okay, this is the benefit that you have claimed. So this is the benefit that you have to return. If the import duty is more than this, then the difference will be exempted. So under claim for drawback of any customs or excise duties levied by the union. Drawback means in section 75 we will see this point, 74, 75, duty drawback. That is export benefits basically. Your taxes paid on inputs as well as the exported goods going out is refunded to you in the form of duty drawback. So if suppose you have claimed 20,000 duty drawback and the import duty is say 46,000, so you will have to pay the duty drawback of 20,000 or the import duty, whichever is less. So if the import duty is say 46,000, then this excess will be exempted. So you'll have to pay only 20,000 and 26,000 which is excess, the duty which is this is the import duty which is in excess will be exempted. Understood? So anything which is excess will be exempted. Then second is under claim for drawback of any excise duty levied by the state. Excise duty is levied by state. Excise duty levied by states is on alcohol products. So write down besides that alcohol products. Then amount of excise duty leviable by state at the time and place of importation of the goods allowed at the time of export. So whatever duty was allowed, whatever drawback was allowed to you at the time of export, that is what you have to pay on import. That's it. Nothing more than that. Means you had exported alcohol, our desi daru, you have exported and now you are importing it back. Then under claim for refund of integrated tax paid on export goods, if you have claimed a refund of integrated tax, this we had studied in GST, remember, you get refund of integrated tax paid on exported goods, then that much you have to pay now. Whatever refund you have claimed here, you pay on re-import. That refund amount is to be paid. Anything excess will be exempted. Then under bond without payment of integrated tax, if you are exported the goods in bond without payment of integrated tax, then on import you will have to pay that integrated tax which you had not paid earlier. So amount of integrated tax not paid, you have to pay now. Earlier you didn't pay, now pay it. You didn't pay because it was export. Now you are saying that it is not export. This is our own goods. So okay, then pay it now. Pay what you had not paid earlier. And lastly, under duty exemption schemes, these are all the FTP scheme, foreign trade policy, various exemption schemes. So a lot of exemptions are there. Whatever exemption you have claimed, you have to pay it now, basically. Okay. And if you had filed bonds and you had not paid the amounts, then you have to pay those amounts now. Basically, what this whole point says, that whatever kind of export benefit you have received at the time of export, it is exemption scheme, it is refunds, it is drawbacks, whatever you have received, you pay it back. That's it. So that is first point. Second point is goods other than those falling under serial number 1 exported for repairs abroad. Exported for repairs abroad. Like for example, Indigo Airlines has imported Airbus, the aircrafts manufactured by Airbus company, into India, and they are using it in India. But it requires some repairs. So that the aircraft will fly to France in the Airbus factory, it will go there, it will get repaired and come back. So in this case, what it says, the duty of custom which would be leviable, means this is the amount payable, leviable if the value of re-imported goods after repairs were made were made up of the fair cost of repairs. Underline this, fair cost of repairs, carried out including cost of materials used in repairs, whether such costs are actually incurred or not, insurance and freight charges both ways, to take it and come back. So we'll take the freight charges, the freight that is required for exporting the goods and then again coming back, freight both ways, insurance and the cost of repairs. That much value we'll do and charge tax on that. Means taxable amount is equal to the cost of repairs. So we are not going to charge duty on the whole value of the aircraft. Okay, it has gone for repairs only, na, and then coming back. So we will charge duty on the repair expenses and not on the whole value of the aircraft. Okay, so that's what it says. Taxable value is equal to cost of repairs, fair cost of repairs. So if the cost of repairs is not separately known, then we'll assume it to be something fair cost, whatever is the fair cost, plus insurance for taking the goods outside and bringing it back into India, plus freight both ways for taking the aircraft there and bring. Now if the example is aircraft, you will not require freight, but you will have to incur the petrol cost and all that will be included. But if some other goods are going out for repairs, then they will need the freight. If it is going by ship, then the ship freight. If it is going by air, then the air freight. So that freight will be added both ways, to take it and bring it back, to and fro. So this value will be computed and then tax will be charged on that. Okay. Then third point says, cut and polished precious and semi-precious stones exported for treatment abroad. If they are going out of India for treatment, there's some kind of a treatment to be given to the stones, some polishing and all. So they are going out of India just for that purpose and then they will come back. Then duty of custom, which would be leviable if the value of re-imported precious and semi-precious stones after treatment were made up of fair cost of treatment. Just like repairs, it was fair cost of repairs. Here it is fair cost of treatment, carried out including cost of material used in such treatment, whether such costs are actually incurred or not, again or not, insurance and freight both ways. Similar. Then fourth point says that if parts and components of aircrafts replaced or removed during the course of maintenance, repair or overhaul of the aircraft in a special economic zone and brought to any other place in India, they are removed and brought to any other place in India, there would be no tax. Absolutely no tax, completely exempt. So they are removed, during the repair process the old parts are removed and then they are brought into India. Are you going to charge tax on that? No, leave it. And goods other than those falling under the above 4 points, also no tax. There will be absolutely no tax. Then there is condition, provided that the Assistant or Deputy Commissioner of Customs is satisfied that. So all these exemptions are allowed, provided the first few points are regarding timing, that what should be the time of import. So it says in case of Bhutan, the machinery and equipment other than exported under so and so, so and so, so and so, forget all that, other than these duty entitlement schemes, is re-imported within 7 years. Means if you had exported machinery and equipment to Bhutan and you are importing it within 7 years, then this concession will apply after the exportation, or within such extended period not exceeding another 3 years as may be allowed by the principal or the commissioner, principal commissioner or commissioner. So 7 plus 3 for Bhutan. Then in all other cases, the goods other than those exported under the same, other than these schemes, are re-imported within 3 years after their exportation, or within such period as may be extended but not exceeding 2 years. So it will be 3 plus 2. So for Bhutan it is 7 plus 3, for other cases it is 3 plus 2. Okay, so within 3 years it should be re-imported. then only you will get this concession. Otherwise, you will have to pay full import duty. C point says that in case of goods exported under these schemes, then the time for import is 1 year plus 1 year extension. So it will be 1 plus 1. Then fourth condition is that the goods are the same which were exported. Obviously, the goods which were exported and the goods which are imported should be same, not something else. Then in case of goods falling under serial number 2, there has been no change in ownership. Okay, of the goods. So we had exported and we are ourselves importing the same. There is no change of ownership at any time. And in the case of goods falling under serial number 1 and 3 of the table, and where the value of exported goods was counted towards fulfillment of export obligation, the amount of custom duty leviable on the duty-free inputs obtained from nominated agencies but for the exemption availed under Ministry of Finance notification number so and so shall be paid in addition to the amount of duty payable under column number 3. So if you had taken some concessions apart from what is given in column 3, then you have to pay back those concessions also. Okay, the duty free inputs obtained, the duty free inputs means the raw material was allowed to you duty free, and then you had exported the finished goods and now you are bringing it back. So you have to not only pay back the export benefits that you had received on export, but also the duty free inputs that you had received. So you have to pay duty on them also. And in case of goods falling under serial number 4, the goods are returned to the owner of the aircraft without any sale, provided further that nothing contained in this notification shall apply to re-imported goods. Now there is another condition, that it will not apply. Nothing contained in this notification shall apply to re-imported goods which had been exported by a 100% export oriented unit or a unit in a free trade zone as defined under section 3 of Central Excise Act. So if it is exported by 100% EOU or FTZ unit, then this notification doesn't apply. Which had been exported from a public warehouse or a private warehouse appointed or licensed as the case may be under section 57 or 58 of the Customs Act. This is the we'll see this later on in this customs. When you import the goods and you can store them in the warehouse, we had seen this much, that imported goods can be stored in the warehouse, and from there if you re-export them, okay, so in that case you import it, you re-export it, so you haven't paid any benefits, you haven't paid any tax, nothing. And then if you re-import the goods, you will have to pay full import duty. Then this concessional notification doesn't apply. Or which fall under the 4th schedule to Central Excise Act 1944. Forget it. Then this notification will apply to exports for which order permitting clearance and loading under section 51, that is the export clearance, has been given on or after 1st day of July 2017. So this is a new notification now. And similar exemption is given under notification number 46/17 to exports for which order permitting clearance and loading under 51 has been given before 1st day of July 17. In such cases is also exemption is also allowed of CVD of excise and VAT levied under 3.1 and 3.5. So basically 46 and 47 are there. 46 is for the old exports in which there was excise levy, that is CVD of excise and VAT was there, and in the new notification there is integrated tax. So that is the only difference, other things remain the same. And the notification comes into force on 1st July 17. Explanations are given which is of no use. That is of no use. Great. So a lot of sections we have seen in this lecture. So let's take a break now, and in the next lecture we'll continue.